There was a time when you could buy a crop dusting airplane for just $250. It was strong enough to survive a crash, but not strong enough to save the pilot. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. So get this, Delta Airlines. You know, the massive global airline that somehow still loses luggage in Atlanta? Yeah, they started out killing bugs. Seriously, grab a drink and get comfortable, because the history of the crop duster is way wilder than it has any right to be. This is a story that runs from $250 war surplus death traps to $1 million flying machines that look like NASCAR roll cages with wings. And it all starts in the 1920s. The American South was facing a full-blown agricultural disaster. The boll weevil was absolutely devastating cotton crops, and farmers were desperate. So someone had a very early aviation idea. What if we just strap a hopper full of poison to an airplane? That airplane was the Huff-Daland Duster, specifically the Petrol 31. It arrived around 1924 and became the first aircraft actually designed from the ground up to kill bugs. Earlier experiments used flimsy wooden and wire airplanes that quickly rotted when exposed to chemicals. Huff-Daland fixed that by using a welded steel tube fuselage, rugged, durable, and practical. They nicknamed it the Puffer because of the way it dusted crops. And here's the part that always catches people off guard. The company operating these planes, Huff-Daland Dusters, eventually evolved into Delta Airlines. Before jet bridges and frequent flyer miles, they were dusting peach trees in Georgia. The man running the operation, C.E. Woolman, was obsessed with safety and practicality. He demanded a plane that was rugged, maneuverable, and, this is my favorite detail, he insisted the exhaust stacks be kept far enough away from the chemical hopper because, and I quote, sparks might ignite the inflammable dust, which is a very polite way of saying, please don't build me an exploding airplane. Now, fast forward to 1945. World War II ends, and the US government suddenly has thousands of surplus military trainers it doesn't need anymore. Enter the Boeing-Stearman Model 75, better known as the Cadet. You could buy one for as little as $250. That's not a typo. That's cheaper than a decent tablet today. The Stearman was legendary for being built stronger than a bridge. Its fuselage tubing was thick, overbuilt, and designed to survive student pilots learning how not to fly. One aviation expert even joked, if you feel an overwhelming urge to crash an airplane, this is obviously the one to do it in, because it would probably poke a hole in whatever you hit. But for crop dusting, it came with a deadly flaw. To convert a Stearman into a duster, mechanics ripped out the original engine and bolted on a massive 450 horsepower radial. Then they installed the chemical hopper in the front cockpit. That meant the pilot sat behind the load. If you crashed, the engine came back, the hopper came back, and you were right in the middle. Leland Snow, an agricultural aviation legend we'll get to shortly, described this setup perfectly. He called it being the meat in the middle of a sandwich. Not exactly OSHA approved. By the late 1950s, the industry finally realized something important. Maybe we should stop converting warplanes and start designing aircraft specifically for this job again. That realization gave us the Grumman Ag-Cat. Grumman was famous for building rugged Navy fighters like the Hellcat and the Wildcat, so when they entered agricultural aviation, they leaned into what they knew best. The Ag-Cat was a biplane in an era dominated by sleek monoplanes, and that was entirely intentional. Biplanes turn tighter, fly slower, and handle better at low altitude, which is exactly where crop dusters live. But the real brilliance was in the safety engineering. The Ag-Cat featured a progressive collapse fuselage. In a crash, the nose was designed to crumple and absorb energy so the pilot didn't have to. The cockpit was sealed and pressurized to keep chemicals out. Even the wing design was clever. The upper wing would stall before the lower one, creating a natural nose-down recovery if things got sketchy 10 feet above the ground. It wasn't flashy. It was smart, and it saved lives. Around the same time, another designer was taking a different approach. John Weatherly looked at the big agricultural planes and decided to focus on the small grain market instead. His aircraft, the Weatherly 201 and 620, were innovative in quieter ways. He introduced wingtip vanes, small vertical surfaces designed to break up wingtip vortices. That meant wider, more controlled spray patterns and less drift onto neighboring fields. or porches. The 620 even featured a nose-mounted Weathero fan that pilots could adjust in flight to maintain consistent pump pressure even as wind conditions changed. And the marketing? Absolutely optimistic. Weatherly claimed their spray control was so precise that an environmentalist may even invite you to lunch. I admire the confidence. I'm not sure I'd buy the lunch invite. Finally, we arrive at the turning point, the air tractor AT-301. This was the brainchild of Leland Snow, a man often called the Thomas Edison of agricultural aviation. Snow hated the idea of retrofitting old airplanes. He wanted a purpose-built machine, one designed from day one for safety, efficiency, and durability. He started Air Tractor in a one-room office in 1970. By 1973, the AT-301 was flying. Unlike Stearman, the hopper was placed directly at the aircraft's center of gravity, so the plane didn't change its handling as the load was dispersed. The cockpit was sealed, air-conditioned, and protected by a steel roll cage that looked more like something from NASCAR than from a biplane hangar. It was rugged, it was modern, and it worked. And here's a fun detail to drop at family gatherings. The Disney character, Dusty Crophopper, he's based on an air tractor. The filmmakers even recorded the sound of a real air tractor engine to keep it authentic. So in just over a century, agricultural aviation evolved from surplus war trainers that cost $250 to turbine-powered machines with GPS, air conditioning, and serious crash protection. The job is still dangerous. The flying is still demanding. But at least now, the pilots aren't the meat in the sandwich anymore. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.